the National Basketball Association heads into a crucial weekend of talks with its players union in hopes of coming together on an agreement and ending a 3-month lockout. Our next guest has vast experience with NBA labor negotiations. Charles Grantham is the former executive director of the NBA Players Association. As principal negotiator, Mr. Grantham helped to establish the league's 4 historic collective bargaining agreements between 1980 and 1995, and he is joined by my colleague Michelle Steele. Michelle?
That is right, Mark. He has faced David Stern at the other side of the negotiating table and has lived to tell the tale here. So, Charles, I know that now you are the head of a sports business consultancy named Grantham, Lanza, and O'Neill, and you do have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in sports as well as especially pro basketball. So let's talk about the odds of a season actually happening. You know, when you hear David Stern say things like the start of the season is in jeopardy based on what happens at today's meeting and the meetings over the weekend, do you think that's a bargaining tactic, or are there teeth there to what Stern's saying?
Well, there's some teeth, but at the same time, we have to recognize that probably 2 weeks ago when they had their meeting, the players were willing to take less. And that expression of reducing their percentage was significant because for a year and a half, no one had any idea as to where that split would be. So the fact that that was a plus leads us to this point, which I think is a critical weekend because David is trying to establish the fact that the beginning of the season is at risk. And we all knew that from day one of the lockout. But I think you're getting closer to being able to actually effectuate a start of the season in November.
So assuming that there is no progress, and up to this point there hasn't been a tremendous amount of progress, you know, versus where the NFL was at day 92 or day 93 of their lockout, what's the takeaway from this weekend? Is this the weekend that we actually start to lose real revenue?
No, I think the takeaway from this weekend is that both sides are seeing that the seriousness of the problem is starting to escalate. Clearly, until you miss games, players aren't really feeling the economic pinch.
Right.
And until teams start to lose revenue on a larger scale, it's the same thing. So probably within this next week to 10 days, we'll get closer to what I would consider a drop-dead date as to how a season could start on time or not.
Now, one very interesting aspect of today's meeting is that it's the first meeting in a very long time that we're seeing some very big stars take more of a public role. I know Carmelo is there. I know Kevin Durant is there. I know LeBron, D. Wade. You know, we spoke to Dwayne Wade not too long ago. He told us that he hadn't really taken a big public role because of the owner's unwillingness to listen, is what he said. And he also said he's ready to give up the season. Here's what he said in his own words.
If they're not listening, if their backs is turned when we're talking, then what's the point? You know, we're willing and we're in a position where if it takes a year lockout to get the right deal, then that's what we have to do.
He says that's what we have to do. We're ready to give up the season. And quite frankly, I think he joins a chorus of players who say they're ready to give up this season. I know that Bodog very recently came out with odds for the season and the best odds for no season. What do you think? Are we going to have a season?
I still think it's 60-40 because I think the framework in favor of a season, because I still believe that as long as the players are determined to take less in their formula, that and also management, you know, granted a slight concession and say that we'll look at the hard cap and think more softly about the soft cap rather more positively. So there's a little bit of movement. The question is you need more and you need greater movement. The dialogue is still there. The dialogue is still there.
So you're giving the best odds to having a season. What about a 50-game season? Is that the next?
No, I really think this time I don't believe that the league is interested in a 50-game season. I think what you'll see, if in fact they get to a drop-dead date, it would be along the lines of either a full season or no season.
All or nothing. And finally here, I want to ask about Kobe Bryant because there is a lot of speculation that he might be going to Italy. Do you think, clearly, he's not involved in the meeting today because he's in Italy. Do you think that's a sign that he thinks the season's in jeopardy?
Well, if you notice, all of them have escape clauses, so they're all able to come back to the NBA once this lockout is ended. You know, I'm sure the Lakers are a little concerned that you always be concerned about the possibility of injury, but it's a double-edged sword. On the other hand, we know he's going to be in shape to play. So as long as there's an out of their contracts to come back, then I don't think it really affects these negotiations.
There is an opt-out, and you got to bet that he'll have a lot of insurance over there. When
I'm sure that his agent
well.
properly insured his contract with the Lakers, for example.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Again, that was Charles Grantham. He is the head over at Grantham, Lanza, and O'Neill Sports Business Consultancy, and of course was the head of the NBA Players Union.